Good morning. It's Monday morning. Today is Monday, 29 September 2025. And of course, my name is Winifred Ugbebo, your host on the program Inside Nigeria. Today's show, we are looking at what the papers are saying, including Nigeria's foremost influential newspaper, Leadership. We'll go to Leadership this morning and this hour and see what Leadership has to offer on its menu. Government steps in to resolve oil union Dangote Refinery rule. Leading story into this Leadership, and in all the papers, of course, news broke over the weekend over the row between the oil union and Dangote Refinery, emanating from the purported sack of some Nigerians in the refinery, of course, which Pegasan and other oil union workers didn't take kindly to. They see or feel that it's targeted at their members who actually joined the union this aftermath. And on that basis, Pegasan has written for a strike action today. Labour Minister facilitates meeting between parties today. Fears of electricity shortages rise as oil workers down to Monday. Government steps in to resolve oil union Dangote Refinery rule. Leading story today's Monday newspaper edition of Leadership newspaper. Still on the cover of Leadership, village head 11 vigilantes killed by gunmen in Kwara, coming from police. Village head 11 vigilantes killed by gunmen in Kwara, police. The story continues on page 4 of Leadership. Nigeria's challenges didn't start with Tinubu's government, Akume. Hunger 80, AFDB backs Nigeria on expansion of agri zones to 24 states. SEC raises the alarm over AI-generated investment scams. Union accuses federal government of illegality over release of Osun Council funds. Nigeria 65, Jonathan Osibajo Jega orders to demand bold electoral reforms. That story continues on page 27 of Leadership. Of course, we know that 2 days from today, that is just next tomorrow, October 1st, Nigeria will be celebrating 65 years anniversary of its independence, and Jonathan Osibajo Jega orders to demand bold electoral reforms. That story continues on page 27 of Leadership, Nigeria 65. Towards the masthead, we have the business boss of Leadership on the cover of Leadership, and today's story, business story, Nigerian Aviation Authority moves approval of Chinese C919 for domestic airlines. The Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, is actively exploring the certification of China's C919 jet for use by domestic airlines as ties with Beijing strengthen and amid growing fleet expansion plans. The authority's Director General, Captain Chris Onajomo, told Reuters that the authority is looking into the certification process, which could take several months, despite the aircraft of not having approval from Western regulators. The rest of the story continues on page 4 of Leadership. Nigerian Aviation Authority moves approval of Chinese C919 for domestic airlines. We move ahead to the masthead, where we have no genocide against Nigerian Christians, says Minister. We'll have the picture of the Minister of Information beside our story. Professor Jerry Ghana claims Jonathan will contest 2027 election on PDP platform. That story continues on page 7 of Leadership. Of course, there have been whisperings here and there that President Goodluck Jonathan, former president of Nigeria, is coming back for a second rerun and return to power. And nobody can clarify, nobody knows how true this is, but there are speculations nonetheless. Professor Jerry Ghana claims Jonathan will contest 2027 election on PDP platform. And that concludes review of front headline stories on Leadership. We move to the page 3 of Leadership this morning, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on that ban on raw share not export. That ban on raw share not export. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu recently approved a 6-month temporary ban on exporting raw share not, which he claimed was to curb informal trade, boost local processing, and protect and grow Nigeria's share industry. According to the statement from State House, the ban is subject to review on expiration and specifically aims to boost Nigeria's share value chain to generate around $300 million annually in the short term. This follows the approval earlier in May this year of the Renewed Hope Nigerian First policy, which places Nigeria at the center of all public procurement and business activity, with a strong emphasis on empowering local industries and reducing dependency on imports. We move towards the conclusion of today's stand, where the paper actually takes a stand. Unfortunately, with high logistics costs and high power supply costs, manufacturers produce much more expensive goods than no country wants to buy. Regardless, it is pertinent to stress that the policy on its face value is good, and we commend the government's initiative in this direction. What is urgently required is the political will to pursue it to the point of viability. To that extent, the government should enhance those factors that make local manufacturing attractive, of which power and transportation infrastructure are key. Excerpts from today's stand in Leadership, Monday, September 29, 2025, that ban on raw share nut export. And that takes us to the back page of today's Leadership newspaper, where we have Monday column with Joshua Ocheja. Monday column with Joshua Ocheja. Today is writing on Yahaya and Edward. In quotes, Edward had moved a step higher to be the running mate to Yahaya. Quote from today's column, Monday column with Joshua Ocheja, Yahaya and Edward. Before we leave the back page, let's visit Ghana Must Go. Ghana Must Go on the news. All Nigerian teams crash out of CAF Confederation Cup. All Nigerian teams crash out of CAF Confederation Cup. And Ghana Must Go ask, are they Arsenal fans? Well, Arsenal fans should answer that. With that, we conclude review of front headline stories, editorial today's stand, and the back page of Leadership this Monday. For more, log into the website of Leadership newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Daily Times. Daily Times leading story, just like Leadership before it, says federal government urges Pegasan to chef strike, resolve feud with Dangote. Federal government urges Pegasan to chef strike, resolve feud with Dangote. That story runs on page 2 of the Daily Times. Of course, we already have the picture of a cake, Nigeria 65 cake, about to be caught by Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, Acting Head of State, FCT, Nancy Nathan, Head of the Federal Civil Service, Mrs. Esther Wosinjak, Representative of the First Lady of Nigeria and wife of the Comptroller General of Customs, Mrs. Kike Lomo Adeniyi, President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, and wife, Unoma, cutting the 65th anniversary cake of Nigeria's independence at the National Christian Center in Abuja yesterday. Congratulations to Nigeria once again. We see that beautiful 65 years anniversary cake. Beneath that picture on the cover of the Daily Times, ADC to Tinubu seeking UN Security Council seat baseless without securing lives of Nigerians. Withdraw appointments of APC members as REC Serap test Tinubu. Rabies Day, 70% of dogs in Nigeria require vaccination to contain rabies. CBN boosts Naira with $70 million forex sales as reserves hit $42.2 billion. That story is on page 13 of the Daily Times. SEC raises alarm over AI-generated investment scams, just like in Leadership before it. That takes us to the story on top of the masthead, only story resting on top of the masthead. Allegations of genocide against Christians force divisive, coming from the Minister of Information and Orientation. It's on that note we conclude review of front headline stories on the Daily Times this Monday. For more, log in to the website of the Daily Times. We head up to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Punch newspaper. Punch leading story says marketers fear fuel price hike as Pegasan strike begins. Marketers fear fuel price hike as Pegasan strike begins. Leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Oil union orders shutdown of power plants, alleges military fault crude supply stoppage. TUC threatens strike. Members on standby. Federal government intervenes to meet Pegasan today. Kickers to that leading story on the Punch newspaper. Marketers feel for price hike as Pegasan strike begins. Petrol exports hit 371 billion naira amid heavy import reliance. Pro-Wike lawmakers absent at Fubara's Independence Thanksgiving. Pro-Wike lawmakers absent at Fubara's Independence Thanksgiving. That story is on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. Osun PDP APC clash as federal government releases local government allocation. Police rescue traffic Ghanaian, arrest 5 in Ogun. 2027, Nigerian Guild of Editors warns politicians against personal attacks. And of course, we move to the last paper story just beneath the masthead of the Punch. Of course, is also the story is also an advertorial. Otedola to Umar Sani, your ignorance on subsidy claims is alarming. Calls on federal government to release Ike Imokwede's report. Slams 1 billion naira libel suit against ex-presidential aide. Says Zenon only imported diesel without subsidy. Insists he raised the alarm that's led to probe. And that concludes review of front headline stories on the Punch newspaper this Monday. For more, log in to the website of the Punch newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper on our lineup, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian says Nigeria risks 14.7 billion naira daily loss, fuel crisis as Dangote Pegasan rift deepens. Of course, Ghana summarized the strike, today's strike, and continuous strike by Pegasan in costs. Nigeria risks 14.7 billion naira daily loss, fuel crisis as Dangote Pegasan rift deepens. That story continues on page 5 of The Guardian. Beneath that story, we have today's World Heart Day. World Heart Day. Of course, every human has a heart. Today, we are trained, and the United Nations is showing awareness, showing commemoration on today, particularly to mark World Heart Day. Cardiovascular disease burden worsens amid shortage of specialists. That story continues on page 5 of The Guardian. World Heart Day. Cardiovascular disease burden worsens amid shortage of specialists. Of course, they have an illustration. This time around, is not beneath, is above it. Global causes of death, risk factors for cardiovascular disease burden. We have high blood pressure, that is risk factors for cardiovascular disease. High blood pressure, unhealthy diet, high cholesterol. We have diabetes, overweight and obesity, tobacco, air pollution, kidney disease, physical inactivity, and harmful use of alcohol. These are risks for cardiovascular diseases. High blood pressure, unhealthy diet, high cholesterol, diabetes, overweight and obesity, tobacco, air pollution, kidney disease, physical inactivity, and harmful use of alcohol. Now, just beside it, again, talking about illustration for today's World Heart Day. Nigerian specific data, 400 cardiologists to 220 million Nigerians. 4 in every 10 adult Nigerians are hypertensive. That is much. 1 in 4 adults in Nigeria suffers from some form of heart disease. 29% of all deaths in Nigeria are attributed to CVDs, that is cardiovascular diseases. 8 out of every 10 patients seen at the National Hospital Abuja Clinic have hypertension. Half of every 10 admitted patients are stroke cases, and at least 3 suffer from heart failure. Illustrations beneath atop today's second leading story on The Guardian to commemorate today's World Heart Day. Cardiovascular disease burden worsens amid shortage of specialists. Still on The Guardian newspaper, beneath that, resident doctors issue federal government 30-day ultimatum over unmet demands. Bandits kill 10, kidnap several in Kwara. Federal government dismisses religious terrorism allegation. Punishing suicide attempts undermines mental health reform. SEC warns of AI investment scams targeting Nigerians. We move towards the masthead of The Guardian. Insecurity. ADC says Tinubu unqualified to seek UNSC seats. Federal government orders urge unity, shared responsibility at 65th Independent Service. Osun, NULGE, PDP query federal government demand details of released local government funds. And that story is on page 8 of The Guardian. Osun, NULGE, PDP query federal government demand details of released funds. And that brings to a close the review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Monday. For more, log into www.guardian.ng. From The Guardian, we move over to the next paper, and incidentally, the last paper on our lineup, and that is National Economy. National Economy is a sister publication on the stable of Leadership Media Group, and of course, a business weekly newspaper. In print, however, in print is a weekly, and today's weekly print, the headline story is on despite government's 1 trillion naira loan disbursement, 96% of MSMEs still lack access to funding. Manufacturers say high interest loans, inconsistent policies stifling sectors' growth. Leading story on this week's print business newspaper, National Economy. Despite government's 1 trillion naira loan disbursement, 96% of MSMEs still lack access to funding. Manufacturers say high interest loans, inconsistent policies, stifling sectors' growth. Recycling as Nigeria's untapped job creation engine. That story is on page 12 of the paper. And atop the masthead of National Economy, Unity Bank takeover advances as Providus secures 34% AMCON stake. MPA APM terminal signed $60 million MOU to electrify container freight. And that takes us to the page 3 of National Economy, where we look at the editorial for the week. This week's editorial is on tackling food loss and waste, a call to action for Nigeria. Tackling food loss and waste, a call to action for Nigeria. And that concludes review of this week's print news of edition of National Economy. For more and daily news on our news, don't forget to log into the website of National Economy, www.nationaleconomy.com. Well, viewers, is on that note we conclude today's Inside Nigeria. Today's show, we just look at what the headlines are saying, national headlines, that is, including Nigeria's most influential newspaper, Leadership. Don't forget to log into the website of Leadership for continuation of today's stories. And don't also forget to subscribe to all our networks to follow us on this program. My name is Winifred Ugbebo, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.